Hello, everyone. We are just getting started. I logged in a little bit early so that if you guys are ready, you can go ahead and start logging in and say hello in the chat. So I'll just wait here until we are about ready to get started at 10:30 local time. So that's in about 6 minutes or so. Hello there. If you are just joining in, I would love to find out where you are tuning in from. Ooh, Carla, you were the one I was emailing with this morning, right? And then Jonna, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you guys hear the background music I turned on? Perfect. Nope, no rain here. It is actually sunny, but a bit chilly this week. It was in the 30s when I got here this morning at my office. I have a kiddo who I see at 7:15 in the morning before he goes to school. So I got here when it was still a little icy outside. How about you, Carla? What's the weather like there? Cold and sunny. Sounds like we're about the same right now. Let's see how many attendees we have right now. If you guys are just joining, say hello in the chat and make sure you introduce yourself and let us know where you are logging in from. While we are sitting here, it is currently very quiet above me, but just to give you guys all a word of warning, there's actually a restaurant directly above me. And if you've ever tried to get an office space in Palo Alto, you understand how I ended up with an office underneath a restaurant. So there are a few background noises you might hear in our session today that I have no control over because it is the breakfast rush upstairs. So, but they have delicious food. How many kids do I see in the morning? I see 2 kids in the mornings. So there's one boy I see every day, Monday through Thursday, for an hour and a half because his private school can't provide the support services. And then there's another boy I see twice a week before he goes to school, and that way he can get to school right on time. So it's usually kids that can't fit in my schedule in the afternoon or need a little bit more time than I have available in the afternoons. Yes, I'll toss some breakfast through the camera. Isa, did I pronounce your name properly? Hello from France. Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. I saw your registration actually said that you were logging in from France, and I wasn't sure if that's just where your home email was from or if you really are in France. That's fantastic. I would love to know, how did you find me all the way in France? I'm so glad you guys are utilizing the chat this morning. If you are just tuning in, ooh, wonderful, LinkedIn. I like to know where people find me. So if you're just logging in, tell me where you are logging in from. We have everywhere from California to Oregon to France. So we are going a little global. I was wondering if you had found me on my podcast because I've learned some of my people find me internationally through the podcast. And so I was curious. So awesome. Great to know. Hello, Rachel. Thank you for joining us. Podcast first. Perfect. It was funny. I ranked in Barbados or something for my podcast, which I thought it was funny that I even had listeners in Barbados. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn the music off. We will start getting into things soon. Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. I don't even know what day of the week it is. So I'm so glad that you are here. And first of all, I'm very excited that this platform is working so well. This is the very first time I've used Demio for doing webinars. I've taught more courses and classes and webinars than I can ever dream of counting, but this is the first time I'm using this platform. So I'm loving how easy it has been to get you guys all in. And I hope the reminder emails went through okay this morning to give you the links to get in here. And I'm so glad to see you guys introducing yourselves in the chat right now. That's so kind, Isa. Yes, I think we need more people like me everywhere. We even need more people like me, like right here in Palo Alto. I actually have to turn away clients because I can't help as many kids as I would love to help. And so that's actually part of the reason I'm doing this webinar today. And this masterclass is so that I can try to help more and more people when there aren't more of me. And so that way I can try to help as many families and educators as possible in the world of dyslexia. Because yes, we need more people who know how to do dyslexia instruction and training and things like that. So welcome to A Parent's Guide to Dyslexia and Reading Troubles. Some of you are parents, but I also know that some of you are educators. So welcome today. And let's go to the next slide. So today in this masterclass, I'm going to show you how kids with dyslexia and reading troubles can learn to read and to succeed, because that's really what it's all about, right? It's not really about the tutoring or whatever. It is about becoming successful in life long after school is over. It looks like we have somebody else who just joined our class today. So if you can introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're from. All right, so as a special bonus today, if you stay to the end, there was going to be an extra special opportunity to work with me if you decide to take the next steps with me. And there will be Q&A time as well. So I'd like to just give a quick little reminder to try to eliminate distractions and focus on what we're learning today, because you'll always get more out of it if you're really focused at what's happening. Close any extra tabs or emails that might distract you, and grab a piece of paper to take some notes. But I will be putting things in the chat that you can just download as well. So what I would like you to do is in the chat, when you think of the word dyslexia, what comes to mind? Go ahead and start putting in what you think. It's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the word dyslexia. Struggles with reading and spelling? Absolutely. Frustration. Jana, that's an excellent one. Usually that's how I find kids, is they are so frustrated they need something different. Anybody else? What are some extra ones? And if you don't want to comment, I actually have a little poll that I can add in for you guys. Oh, hard. Yes, things are really hard when you have dyslexia. And there's also a little poll I'm putting in the chat right now. If you can put what you think you are in terms of how much do you feel like you know about dyslexia right now? We've already got a couple answers in. Reversals, yep, we definitely see a lot of reversals, Ashley. That's a great answer. Rachel, you are very well versed. Yes, it's a learning disorder with difficulty in reading, but they might have normal or even above average intelligence. All right, so according to our polls so far of the people who've answered, most of you know a little about dyslexia and somebody knows a lot, which is fantastic. So thank you all for joining. Let's go ahead and move on. So if you are in the right place, if you are curious and want to learn more about dyslexia, you're in the right place if you just want to gain some extra understanding. You are definitely in the right place if you're worried about a child in your life who has dyslexia or struggles with reading in general, even if they don't have a diagnosis. And you're in the right place if you just want to help kids with dyslexia. So whatever your reason is, I'm here for you. All right, so tell me, which one are you? Curious, gain understanding, worried, or you want to help? Or if you have another reason, you're welcome to add in your own. But these were the top 4 I came up with. So add it in the chat. Why are you here today? What brings you? Ashley wants to help. That's fantastic. And Rachel, you want to help as a tutor and educator? We need so many more tutors and educators that can help kids with dyslexia. I'm so glad you're here. Jonna wants to help. And John is helping me a little bit today too, so thank you. And Carla, fantastic. And that's what we need. We need more cheerleaders that can help kids and know the right ways to get them the help that they need. All right, moving on. So welcome. My name is Lisa Parnello. I am the owner of Parnello Education Services. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, all at Parnello Education. Or if you haven't found me on my podcast already, that's where most of you I think are from. It's called Dyslexia Devoted, and you can find it anywhere on any of the major platforms or on my website too. You can listen to it straight on the website. A little about me. I'm the CEO of Parnello Education Services and host of the Dyslexia Devoted podcast. I do dyslexia therapy as well as being a Wilson credentialed trainer, meaning that I train teachers. And I am the former lower school director of Sand Hill School, which is a school for kids with dyslexia, which is right here in Palo Alto, like 10 minutes down the road from where my office is now. I counted the other day as I was making these slides. I have helped 59 kids with dyslexia just in my private practice doing one-on-one dyslexia therapy. I've helped hundreds of kids in K-8 schools over the last 16 years. I didn't count those ones. That would be a lot of counting if I counted 3 different schools and so many classrooms. And for the last 10 years, I've been doing parent and teacher education trainings through various kinds of workshops, including Wilson Reading System workshops as well. And I've certified over 20 teachers to help kids with dyslexia using Wilson Reading System. So that's the program I use, but it's not the only one. There are many other ones. And I, lucky enough, had the opportunity to be featured in Distinct Magazine, which is a newer magazine for dyslexia. So if you want to learn more, that's a cool one to check out. All right, know the facts. Did you know 95 to 97% of kids can all learn to read? And it's not usually a problem with learning, it's a problem with how the child is being taught. So most of the time the kids can learn, they just need to do it in a different way. Apparently my slides got a little messed up. Forgive the overlapping. Can you imagine what it would feel like to see the child in your life succeeding in reading, school, and life? Wouldn't that be fantastic? Because it's definitely possible. Understanding dyslexia is the very first step to a successful future. And aren't these kids in the picture so cute? I like the idea of them being little business people, because did you know a lot of people with dyslexia grow up to start their own businesses or become CEOs of companies? More on that later. All right, so what would be easier if you knew how to help a child with reading troubles? Answer in the chat. Give me a couple of things you can imagine would make life easier for a child or for yourself if the child was no longer struggling with reading. For me, I always think about homework battles. I had a kiddo literally sneak his homework into my office this morning because it is a battle to get homework done at home. And so he's supposed to use his time with me to learn how to read and spell, but instead he snuck his homework in so that I would help him do his homework because it's just a battle to try to get it done. It's so hard. All right, Jonna, less frustration with homework and stress, for sure. Carla, self-confidence with learning. That is the most precious thing that I love to see, is when the kids first start coming in and they're stressed out and angry about school, and then all of a sudden they come in with a bright old smile because they know that they can do it now. It's pretty fantastic. Learning new concept, homework, confidence, yep, all those things could get better. So this is the roadmap of our masterclass today. So we just did our introduction. We're going to talk about 3 keys to success with dyslexia. And then we're also going to talk about next steps with me with my Discovering Dyslexia program. And then we will end with Q&A time. I don't have a super hard stop at the end, so I can answer a bunch of questions by the time we get to the end of this too. But if you guys have to hop off right after an hour, that is fine. We are expected to go for 1 hour today, so until 11:30 Pacific. All right, so the 3 keys to success. Here's what we're going to be talking about today. Key number 1 is understand what dyslexia is and why it makes it so difficult to learn how to read and spell. Key number 2 is discover what strategies work and find out why a lot of kids are struggling in school and their school programs aren't currently helping. And last but not least, number 3, identify accommodations that work to work smarter, not harder. So on our little roadmap, let's stop at key number 1. Understand dyslexia. First, you have to understand it in order to find a solution to all of those struggles. So when a child is struggling with reading, there's usually one of 2 problems. Either they're struggling with reading and how to sound out the words, or there is a struggle with understanding, and they don't understand what they read by the time they get the end. And every once in a while, you will also see a kid who can't read the words, therefore can't understand it. So in that case, I would refer to that as a reading or a decoding problem, not actually an understanding problem, because as soon as you teach them how to read the words, they can figure out the rest. So let's talk about why some kids have so much of a more difficult time than others. And that's because speaking, it's a natural occurring event. Every creature in the universe can communicate with other creatures of their kind. But humans decided to make up reading and writing to keep track of information, and therefore it is not a natural process. So some brains developed over the years ways of figuring out what printed and language things are, but then over the time, not all brains were able to develop the same way, and that's where we think of dyslexia. But we also just think of it as basic neurodiversity. Everybody's a little bit different. No 2 people are made the same. No 2 people think exactly the same. And so there's just a grand diversity, which is what makes the world so fantastic. If we were all the same, we would never have anything new ever, and that would be boring. But by having this neurodiversity, it has all these great, fantastic things. But then when we try to create a world for the normal person, that doesn't always work out so well. When we think about how our brains developed, each of these is a picture of a tree. In our little animal brain, we know no matter which way we look at a tree, it's still a tree. I can look at it straight on. I can stare up at the sky and enjoy the beautiful day and look through the leaves. I can stare down at it from an airplane, or I can see one that has fallen over. And I still know that that is a tree. That's the way our brains are wired, like an animal, to recognize these things. No matter what position they're in, you can still tell what they are. Now, the problem with that comes is when we have letters. Suddenly, when you turn it a different direction, it doesn't mean the same thing anymore. So when a child is trying to read, when you tell them that that's a table, it's still a table even if it fell over. But if you tell them that's a U and that's an N, suddenly it looks exactly the same, just turned around, and it means something completely different, and it represents a completely different sound. When we think about kids with dyslexia, it actually has to do with how their brain is wired. And I had the wonderful pleasure of getting to visit the UCSF Dyslexia Research Center and see the way they use functional MRIs to determine how people with dyslexia are utilizing their brain when they participate in reading. So with a typical person's brain, we usually think about the left side of the brain being associated with language, logic, critical thinking, numbers, reasoning, rationality, and reality. When we think about the right side of the brain, that's when we think more about observation, expression, creation, imagination, creative thinking, intuition, and many other things. So the thing that makes it so difficult to read is that people with dyslexia focus on these right side brain activities to do left side skills. So the part that has to do with language, they are actually utilizing the part of their brain that is more on creative thinking and observation. So they're observing what the words look like more than thinking about the logic as to how the words work. And as they've done their research, they're able to see wherever there's a weakness on one side of the brain, people with dyslexia tend to have a strength on the opposite side. And this is where we think about all of the fantastic people who have dyslexia who've become really successful. I can think of 6 different students off the top of my head, not even trying to think, whose parents are CEOs of companies here in the Bay Area. And that is because their brains work differently. Dyslexia tends to run in families. And so the things that make school hard can also make all of these amazing skills. And they can learn to think outside the box and be more creative and solve problems. So sometimes they don't necessarily do well in school, but that doesn't mean they don't do well in life. And that's why you'll find out about a bunch of actors and actresses and authors that all have dyslexia, because their brain works differently, and that's not always a bad thing. But it doesn't feel so great in school when you're failing, right? So let's think a little bit more. Let's look at some of the characteristics we're more used to thinking about with dyslexia. One is struggles with rhyming. People think dyslexia is letters moving around on a page, but that's not it at all. It's how they process language. So you can actually see it before they've even picked up a piece of paper or a book. If a child is struggling with rhyming in those early ages, even in preschool, it's an early sign of dyslexia. They can also be slow to learn the letter names or their sounds, poor phonemic awareness, which means their ability to hear the sounds within words and separate them. Like in the word sprint, the kids might go spur it, and they may not realize that it's there's all those different sounds within that word. Kids with dyslexia usually have trouble either breaking apart all of those sounds, or if they see them all on a page, if they say all the sounds, they have trouble putting them all together. And all of this leads to slow, labored reading because it's so hard for them. Some other things are not actually related to text itself. There are a lot of other connections to dyslexia as well, such as poor organization and time management, and especially since a lot of people with dyslexia also have ADHD, that all goes hand in hand. They tend to have difficulty with learning math facts because it has to do with rapid automatic memory. And so people with struggles with dyslexia, their brain takes a longer pathway to get to the right information. So even if they know the answer, they might go, that thing, the whatchamacallit. So they know what they mean to say, but finding the language to explain their answer doesn't come out so quickly. And that crosses over into other areas like math facts. They might be able to read some words, but no strategies for other words they've never seen before. And they were more than likely having very poor spelling. And in fact, a lot of people who don't realize dyslexia runs in their family, it's because somebody else in the family just had poor spelling, but was able to figure out the reading piece or could memorize to learn to read. So you have to figure out what is the source of the trouble. Is it the difficulty reading the words? Is it the amount of work that it prevents understanding? Or is it a problem with vocabulary knowledge and preventing clear comprehension? Before we move on, I want to let you guys all know that you don't have to wait till the Q&A session to leave questions in the chat. So if you go ahead and put your questions in the chat as you think of them, there's no need to wait, and then I'll answer them at the end. Because I know if I were you, I'm not very good at remembering my question 20 minutes from now. So pop them in the chat and I will answer them either in the moment if they go perfectly with the slide I'm on, or at the end if it's better answered at the end, okay? All right, so next on our roadmap, key number 2. You have to discover strategies. Not all teaching methods are created equally. And I speak from experience. I have 2 different certifications for teaching, both general and special ed. Neither one of them taught me how to teach kids with dyslexia. It wasn't until I got even more certifications that I finally learned how to help kids the way I help them now, and I would never teach a different way now. For reasons that we've explored, children struggling to read aren't going to be helped by a one-size-fits-all approach that is typical in so many schools. Rather, we need teachers who are trained to use a toolbox of principles that they can apply in different types of children. And that quote is by Marianne Wolf, who is a researcher and an advocate for people with dyslexia, and she's authored multiple books. And if you've had the privilege of watching her live, she's pretty, I don't know how to explain, energetic, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. She just pulls you in. Magnetic, I guess. She has a magnetic energy. She just pulls you in and just wants you to listen to every word she has to say. And so she is a great resource if you haven't checked her out before. All right, so first you have to think, how are they being taught? When we think about kids struggling at school, the first question we need to ask is, how are they being taught how to read? Maybe it's the strategy that's not working, not the kid's brain that's not working. Are they using leveled readers? And if you aren't sure what a leveled reader is, it's the ones that are labeled A to Z. The other day I had a parent go, well, the school says he went from level C to level F. But have you ever actually looked at those books? There are no spelling patterns or any sort of pattern to how the words are written. The pattern has to do with the language being used and how complicated the sentence is. They're simple sentences that are usually predictable. I see the cat. I see the dog. I see the hippopotamus. But sometimes there's a lack of a pattern. And the students, when they're reading through the stories, are looking at the pictures. They're being taught how to predict what word comes next, and they're being taught to guess what word would make sense. Now, what happens when there's no pictures? When there's no pictures left, what strategies are you going to use? If you were taught to guess the word and based on the picture and what would make sense, what about if you're reading about a new topic? What if you've never heard of astrophysics? How are you supposed to guess what word means next? How are you supposed to look at a picture when books stop having pictures in about 4th grade? Then what? The strategies that make kids look like they're reading well in elementary school, as they get to middle elementary, and those strategies don't work anymore. When they're reading about new topics they've never heard of, they can't use context. When there's no pictures in the books anymore, they can't look at the picture to guess. And the strategies fail them for the long term. Kids with dyslexia need strategies. So many times kids are given a spelling list of words to memorize, but no strategies on how they work. Just this morning, that kiddo who snuck his homework in here, I looked at it and it was all about the doubling rule. So like the word patting, like I'm patting the dog, how there's a 2 T's when the word pat only has 1 T. That child was given 0 instruction as to why there's an extra T all of a sudden. He was told to write the word 3 times for all 13 spelling words. There was no instruction as to why it works that way, or which words need a double and which ones don't. No instruction. It was just copy all of these things down 3 times. And the first strategy he used is to write 1 letter all the way down the page, and then the second letter down the page. And I had to stop him and go, let's at least write the whole word at a time. Because they aren't learning how to spell. He's just trying to get the work done, but he's not learning anything. And so we need to make sure our students learn the strategies to apply to any word, not just one specific list of words for this week that you may never see again. So if you haven't heard it already, I'm obsessed with Sold a Story. So it's all stuff that I know because I teach kids with dyslexia. I've seen why they're struggling. But if you haven't, please, 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 if you get nothing out of this today, go listen to Sold a Story. It is a podcast with 6 episodes that will completely change your way of thinking of why kids of all varieties struggle with reading with how they're teaching in most schools these days. Yes, Issa's already listened to it. Fantastic. Yeah, I am telling it to every parent and educator I can possibly find. Even if you've never listened to a podcast in your whole life, please listen to this one. I had one family that I was trying to explain to them why their kids are struggling so much. And I sent them the podcast, and they also listened to my own podcast. So the parent walked in one day. He goes, I listened to that podcast and I got so upset this weekend. And I was like, my podcast was upsetting you? What did I do? And he goes, no, the Sold a Story one. We were getting angry in the car. And even the kids were pointing out how when they come to you, you actually teach them how to read, and the kids at school, that's not what they're doing. And I've had another boy in here going, why don't other teachers know how to teach dyslexia? Like when I am reading, you tell me how it works. They don't do that at school. So you need, if you do nothing else today, to go check out this one. It's only 6 episodes, so it's like 6 hours total. And true story, by the time we hit the end, I listened to it when I was traveling for a dyslexia conference. Actually, I listened to an episode at midnight one night because I couldn't wait to listen to the next episode. All right, moving on, off my little soapbox tangent. So kids with dyslexia must have clear instruction on the spelling patterns. They don't pick it up naturally. It's just not how their brain works. You can hand them a page with all the words having the same pattern, like the boy had today, and they don't recognize the pattern. And unless somebody explicitly tells them, here's what the pattern is, here's the rule on how it works, they won't learn it. Now, we need to have tasks that focus on the spelling patterns, not on memorization. So for example, in this image right here, you will see they're doing boxes to do the shape of the words. This is how kids spell things wrong because they just memorize the shape of the word. They're not actually learning that we should go k, a, p, and practice where the sounds are. Sometimes there are different box activities where they're focusing on putting a sound in each box, and that's totally different and super celebrated. Let's keep doing those ones. So sometimes I think they're called alkaline boxes. I don't know. I mispronounce it every time. And so they do use a box in order to put each sound representation within a box. That is totally separate than these ones that have the boxes and shapes to memorize the shape of a word. We don't want them memorizing the shape of the word. We want them memorizing how to approach any word. And it needs to be systematic. So systematic meaning one builds on the other. So just like when we think about a bunch of Jenga blocks, we also want to think about the structure. If you don't have any, it's all going to fall apart. There's nothing to build on. So if you rush through those basic, boring foundational skills, they will fail later on. It might seem like, oh, those are too easy. They don't need those. But those are the building blocks that lead up to this great big tower of success. And so even if I have a 7th or 8th grader come to me, they still start with 3-letter words. They learn why those 3-letter words work. And I tell them it's just like when you take a Spanish class. The first thing they teach you in Spanish class is the Spanish alphabet. Even if you already know the alphabet in English, you don't know the Spanish one. And so it's all about studying the language. So that's how I explained it to the older kids, is they have to know how our language works and why it says cat instead of Kate. And we want to go through the strategies of how our language works. The other bit is morphology, which, by the way, nobody ever taught me morphology in school ever. So this is definitely something I learned as an adult. Morphology is how you develop vocabulary, and it's identifying what the parts of words mean. So like the word scribe is actually a base that can turn into subscription or scripture and many other things, and it means to write. And so you can teach kids to learn new words by using morphology. So when you are using morphology, if a student has never heard of something before, but they know the meaning parts within the word, then they can be able to understand approximately what this new word means. So for example, I had a student read geothermic, and I said, what does that mean? And she goes, temperature of the earth? And she wasn't totally making it up. She knew that geo had to do with the earth, and she knew thermo had to do with heat or temperature. So she was able to get a reasonable approximation of about what that word would mean, even though she'd never seen it before. And that's what we want our kids to do, because kids with dyslexia, their vocabulary tends to get diminished because a lot of what we do when we talk, there's only about 4,000 words that we use in day-to-day speech. Most of the other words we know come from text. But if you hate reading because reading's hard for you, you never get exposed to those words. And a morphology is a great way to teach kids how to figure out the meanings of new words. All right, I'm covering a lot, so don't forget, use the chat if you need to learn a little bit more later and you want to ask some questions before you forget them. So in order to give you some support that you can take with you today, there are decodable books from Flyleaf Publishing and High Noon Books that are really helpful, and I'm putting them in the chat. I'm putting some links in there right now. There you go. I put 2 links for you right now. Can you tell me if you can see them? Oh, I see somebody clicked it, so that means it worked. So Flyleaf Publishing has free books that you can use online. High Noon Books, you have to order them. So I haven't used the High Noon as much because it costs money and I'm a tutor in California. But the Flyleaf Publishing, I have bought their physical books too because the kids love them and they align pretty closely with the first steps of the reading program that I use here. So those ones are really great resources for you to check out too. All right, now let's move a little further. So we are on our roadmap. We're about to go into key number 3, which means I'm pretty proud. We're staying on track. Am I going too fast? Just right? What do we got? You guys keeping up? Perfect. Okay, good. It's funny. I have done so many webinars, but this is the first time I've done it for my own company. So it's actually kind of funny. So I get more nerves. And when I get more nervous, I talk quicker. So I'm so glad that you are keeping up with me. I'm trying to keep pace for you guys. All right. Utilizing accommodations. And there we go. I had to put away a box off of my screen. So when we talk about accommodations, these accommodations are kind of forever. So, but I like to think about them in different ways. Most of all is to work smarter and not harder. Kids with dyslexia already have to work hard enough. Let's not make it more difficult for them. And so as kids are learning how to read, accommodations will change how you do something, not what you are doing. That would be a modification. So accommodations, some kids and adults with dyslexia might kind of need to use forever because it makes life easier. And why work so hard when you don't have to? So some of the examples would be extended time, audiobooks to listen to a book instead of physically reading the text, a quiet space, taking extra breaks. So like one of my students, he says he likes to do his 20 minutes of reading. He'll do 10, go play basketball, and then come back and do 10 more minutes because it is a lot of work for him, but he knows he needs to do it. Typing or using spell check. Some kids also have dysgraphia, meaning the physical labor of writing is very challenging, so they will type instead. They will also break larger assignments into chunks. So if you have a 5-paragraph essay due, instead make it 1 paragraph on Monday, 2nd paragraph on Tuesday, 3rd paragraph on Wednesday, and so forth to break up a really large task. So by the end of the week, it's still due, but it's not so overwhelming if you don't do it all at one time. And I'm going to go back for just a second. As we are thinking about accommodations, they have 2 purposes. Sometimes it is because a student can't do it yet. So if I'm working with a kid with dyslexia and it's really severe and they're 3 or 4 years behind, they literally cannot do their assignments without an accommodation. They have to have them because they can't keep up. But the thing is, even after they learn to read, it still takes a lot of mental effort for them. And so a lot of times I will have the kids say, I will tell them, try to read if you can, but if you're exhausted, you've had a long, busy day, if you try to read it, but you're so tired you can't remember it anyway, what was the point? I would rather you just listen to it. And so they've done research. There's 0 difference between how information is obtained, whether it's when you listen to it or read it yourself. And so therefore, why not just let them use the audiobook if the point is to learn the content? If the point of the task is to learn how to read, yes, go read a book. But if the point of the task is to learn how to do your science assignment, just listen to it. It doesn't make a difference. So make sure that you are coordinating what you're asking of the student with the purpose of the task. Here are some of my favorite audiobook options, and I'm actually putting accommodations in the chat. I made a Google Doc for you guys, so you can just click on links to go to different things. So for this Google Doc, one of the things is Kindle Unlimited. So that one's great for like, it's a low monthly fee. I think it's like $8.99 a month or something. I don't remember, maybe $9.99. I pay for it myself, but it just comes out of my bank account. And it has all sorts of free audiobooks that you can listen to. And that's better for like pleasure reading to get to learn new things because not all of them are free, but you can check out like 10 at a time. And it even includes magazines and stuff. And you can connect it to your Audible so that you can download a book on Kindle Unlimited and listen to it on Audible. Not every single book has the Audible feature as well. But so like I don't always use an Audible subscription because I can listen to my Kindle Unlimited books on Audible. So it's a great little workaround. But on Audible, you actually have more choices of audiobooks. So you can choose from an entire massive library of audiobooks. Kindle Unlimited has a smaller library of resources of what you can use. And then Learning Ally is a great one that will highlight the words for the students as they listen so they can build up their visual memory of what words look like. And a lot of times you can get this for free through the school, especially just because you have a dyslexia diagnosis. And another one is Bookshare. A lot of my students haven't loved Bookshare as much, but it's one that is definitely available. In some schools, it is the only thing they offer. Not all schools offer Learning Ally. But I looked it up and you can actually pay for Learning Ally annually if you can't get it for free. It's still an option as a family that you could do. These ones are Chrome extensions, and some of your options are Speechify, which, by the way, was developed by a dyslexic. How cool is that? And you can actually take a picture of something with an app and then it'll read a text to you. So even if you have like a piece of paper or like an article or a magazine or an assignment from school, and it reads it in a very natural person-like voice. I know one of my students, their school gave them one that just reads it like a robot and she couldn't focus. And then as soon as they used it on Speechify, the student was able to pay better attention because it sounded like an actual human. And it's both an app on the phones as well as an extension on Chrome, so it can read things that are online as well. And a lot of schools use Chromebooks these days. And then there's also Google Read and Write. That is another option. That is a Chrome extension that you can use as well. I don't think I linked that in there. I can add it to it later. I'll write a little note for us. Google Read and Write. Perfect. All right, and then for some spelling options, Grammarly. I'm obsessed with Grammarly. I use it all the time, and it checks spelling and grammar, and it identifies confused words. So if they spelled like the wrong kind of there, it'll tell them they used the wrong one. So sometimes with basic spell checker, it'll just tell you the word is spelled correctly, even if it's not actually the word you wanted. Like I had a girl that used terrorist instead of a terrace. Very different things. One is violence and one is a beautiful patio. But they sounded similar to her, so she misspelled it. So things like Grammarly will tell you when something doesn't make sense, and it gives you the reason for the mistake so that way you can learn from it too. So, and it's actually something that I used over at the school. So because I was the division director, sorry, Isa, it is so sorry to lose you, but I'm so glad you came. This is being recorded, so it'll be sent to you so you can watch the rest of it later if you're missing it today, okay? Thanks for coming. Okay, so when I used Grammarly at the school, we wrote reports for all the parents to read all the time, and I encouraged all of my staff to use Grammarly because it caught so many typos that we just would be exhausted after you write 35 reports. By the 35th one, it's not always coming out so great. So this one's super helpful. All right, and then there's also otter.ai, which does a lot of speech recognition, so that way, if they can't physically take notes, they can record them. And it has pretty great audio recognition. It's actually what I try to use for my podcast to do the transcripts, that when I add it onto the podcast, it catches pretty much everything. Every once in a while, there'll be a few things, but for the most part, it's actually one of the better speech recognition options. So these ones are also on that link that I put up for you guys. All right, so now to learn a little bit more about discovering dyslexia, and then we will do our Q&A time at the end. And it looks like we're staying right on target with where I was hoping to be for timing. So now that you've learned so much more about dyslexia, you have two choices, which is to keep continuing on your own path of learning about dyslexia and doing what you need to do, or let me join you on your journey. So I created a course called Discovering Dyslexia, a Parent's Roadmap to Navigating the First Year. And so this 6-week course gives parents everything they need to know to go on their journey for that first year of helping a child with dyslexia after they discover that dyslexia diagnosis. Discovering Dyslexia is the only course of its kind to walk parents through the entire process from reading that first diagnosis report to the IEP system, the accommodations, and finding the right kind of instruction for your child. It has 5 modules with the diagnosis and assessment results, tools and accommodations for success that I go more in depth than what I'm talking about on our Masterclass today. Then we will go into the IEP process, how to find high quality reading instruction, and knowing all of your educational options. And all of those courses, all of those modules add up to a $497 value. Then I will also be hosting 2 live Q&A sessions, which has a $97 value as your first bonus. And I know I'm not the only dyslexia specialist. There are so many experts in my field. I just have the roadmap for parents to follow the same path that others who've already gone through this journey. You aren't in this alone, and I've learned from so many families that I've worked with over the years that I want to share it with you guys so that you know a better way to go through the process. And it also includes an extra bonus of Dyslexia in Schools, which is a mini course that I created. So you also get that for free as an added bonus if you decide to join Discovering Dyslexia. And if you're still not sure if it's for you, don't worry, it's got a 14-day money-back guarantee, so you can try out those first 2 modules and then go ahead and get a full refund if it's not really what you were looking for. So it's worth $621 for all of those things, the course, the Q&A sessions, and the Dyslexia in Schools mini course. But it's only $197 if you would like to join me on the Discovering Dyslexia journey. And you have a few different options. I also have a VIP treatment where you get 1 hour of personalized support with me in addition to the course for $347, or there is a different varieties of payment plans. So I'm going to go ahead and put Discovering Dyslexia in the chat. And I also promised you an extra bonus, which is that you would actually get a mini VIP if you register for the course while we are live on this webinar today, so that way you get a free 30-minute one-on-one coaching session with me if you sign up while we're in our live chat today, all the way till the end of our Q&A session. So if you decide to go on my website, it's parnelloeducation.com/courses, and then you can click on the image of Discovering Dyslexia, or it is also in the chat right now that you can click on it as well. And if you go to the courses tab, there's a button that says lead the way, I'm ready to sign up, and that only takes you to the full price option. So if you want VIP or one of the payment plans, then you would have to scroll a little further down the page, and there's a way that you can choose how you want to do the payments for it. So don't forget, you get that extra 30-minute consultation with me if you decide to go ahead and sign up today while we're live on our masterclass. All right, it is time for Q&A. So if you could give me your questions, go ahead and put them in the chat of anything else that you are still wondering today. All right, for Rachel, what trainings would you recommend specifically for teachers? I see you're credentialed in Wilson. Why Wilson versus Barton or Orton Gillingham? Is one preferred for dyslexic students? All right, great questions. So I am trained in Wilson because that's what my school was using. So that started it. Orton Gillingham is the original foundation of all the rest of the programs below it. So they are the OG is OG. And so they are where all of the original research came from. The reason I like Wilson, even now that I can choose to go take Orton Gillingham training or whatever's, is that you don't have to make all of the materials yourself. It's already pre-made with a good system. So when you do Orton Gillingham training, you're expected to make up the scope and sequence that you think makes the most sense. And then you make up your own word lists and all the other things. So they basically follow the same methods. And there's something called the Alliance, where Orton Gillingham and Wilson and I believe it's Letters and a few others all have banded together to show that they teach the same basic structure, so that way they can all be successful. I don't prefer Barton because it's more of a canned method of this is exactly every lesson. And kids I've seen go through Barton usually do lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4, versus Wilson and Orton Gillingham go to mastery. So therefore, you could spend 1 lesson on something, you can spend 42 lessons on something, all until you discover what really works best for the people. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the slides so that you can see my actual face. Stop sharing. So when we see kids with some of the other programs, they just go through a very quick sequence. And so when we are using Orton Gillingham and Wilson, it's more about what can that child do? And if they can do it well, we move on quickly. If they need a lot of help, then you might spend a week, 2 weeks, even a month on a skill to make sure they really master it. So both of those are really good. So IMSE has some great training programs. The Academy of Orton Gillingham has great programs. Wilson has great programs. And practicum is really the big piece, is being able to get that practicum training where a coach mentors you working with a kid. And that's really the big thing from just reading out of a book, is having somebody mentor you. Jeff, it's so glad to see that you're here today. Do you recommendations for math programs for kids with dyslexia? And no, I didn't actually give any answers to that yet, Jeff, so good question. For math programs for dyslexia, there's a few different ones, but math is unfortunately less researched and less developed in terms of which programs really work. One of the ones that I know people have had the best success with is Making Math Real, but it is very difficult to get somebody trained in Making Math Real because they only offer it once or twice a year. And even as an educator who's tried to sign up for it multiple times, it is always when I can't do it. Like it's the middle of January during parent-teacher conferences, or it would be in the first week of June while my school was still in session. So Making Math Real is definitely one of the ones that if you can get somebody to be trained in it, that one's fantastic. I've actually done training instead with Marilyn Zecker, who does multisensory math. So she applies multisensory math that is based on the Gordon-Gillingham kind of methods of teaching how to physically touch and move and see quantities and help them understand numbers. So Zecher is Zecher, I believe. And she has a website and training that she has for teaching math that way. And that way it's got a little bit more of a multisensory approach and helping them better understand some of those foundational amounts to numbers to understand what it's really worth. Because if you write 256 versus 2056, if they can physically touch and feel the difference in size, it makes it a little bit easier for it to get a little bit more specific for them. So those would be the two big ones. More than anything for math, kids with dyslexia mostly just need a lot of practice with math facts. A lot of times they can get the conceptual understanding of it, but they get stuck on the word problems. So it's too much language. And so having somebody to teach them how to break down what the word problem is asking of them, having somebody tell them what are the key words you want to look for. Like if it says all together, that means to add. So for math, it's more about being more explicit about how to break down the language piece and how to make it a little bit more multisensory and make it make more sense. So like for algebra tiles is another thing that you can do for multisensory math with their little squares that help them to see how positive and negative numbers work together and things like that. So if they can get more concrete objects to show them how the math works, that tends to work best. There aren't a ton of really great math programs. In fact, I know a lot of teachers wish that we had like an Orton-Gillingham for math. There's not a lot of great resources, so it's more about teacher training and getting teachers to use more multisensory methods that are more concrete and helping them do it, as well as building in as much math fact practice, usually through games, are a little bit more successful. So those would be my biggest answer for you there. Any other questions? Let's see. I'm going through the chat, make sure I didn't miss anything. Can we refer students to me? You can send me students. I currently have a wait list though. So that would be the one thing, is that I do see students both in person and on online. But right now I do have a wait list because unfortunately there are not enough of me in the world right now. All right, so in terms of next steps, I'm going to show you the slides for just one more time. So we answered some of your questions already. Thank you so much for being here. So some of your next steps are you could register for the Discovering Dyslexia course, or since some of you I know are educators, if you share that with some families, that'd be fantastic. Share the webinar or the podcast with a friend. So the podcast is called Dyslexia Devoted, and it's all over wherever you listen to podcasts. So on Apple, on iTunes, on the podcast app, on Spotify, on my website, you can find me everywhere. And I also take requests. So if you have certain topics you would love to learn more about, shoot me a message and I will happily write part of my next podcast episodes to answer some of those questions as they come up. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you all for joining me today. If you have any last questions, I'll stay on the chat for a few minutes longer. And I'm so glad that you joined me today. Have a fantastic rest of your day.